very aware that this particular retreat on this weekend is a kind of gathering of Sangha, taking refuge in Sangha in a way that many retreats, no matter how wonderful, are not. In view of the circumstances that we're facing as a nation. And all of us know how extremely stressful, upsetting these past months of the campaign have been. And then the election, and whether you supported Mr. Trump, and maybe some of you here did, are political conservatives and would have preferred him, or whether you didn't support him, I think we're all profoundly distressed. We are facing a kind of uncertainty that is enormous as a nation. And of course, who is ease in uncertainty? It's a spiritual practice to be at ease with uncertainty, because in fact, we want to know. That's what we are. We want to know what's going to happen. And it's a huge spiritual practice. So I think that we are facing something huge, and coming together with Sangha, and with other people who are practicing the same way that you are and that calls to your heart. Not all of us are blessed with a family in which the family members understand are practicing in that same way. So to be with people where deeply, this is where you can find peace. This is something so very special. So I will say at the outset, because I don't want to pretend that I have been equanimous about all this. As I told you at the very beginning, what I was going to say today has changed like daily in the past several days, and originally I had a whole different idea for what was going to happen now. So in a way this is a little bit ragged, but aren't we all? It's like what's new? So I will say that I did not support Mr. Trump, and have such grave reservations, as maybe you do, doubts, fears about what the future of our nation may be. And recognizing part of my practice needs to just obviously confront that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. The American patriot, Thomas Paine, who we may all remember from way back in our American history courses, Thomas Paine wrote in his pamphlet, Common Sense, he said, "These are the times that try men's souls." And it goes for women too. Different circumstances, but certainly trying as it hadn't been for a long, long time. So I think that whatever we are going to be facing in the future, we are really called on to go deeply into our practice, to recommit in a deep way, to look into it deeply, into your practice, not only formally, sitting on a cushion, but informally. How does it permeate your life? How in daily life do you bring it into your life, and does it support you? It's, I think, very interesting to remember that the greatest spiritual growth that we face usually happens in times of uncertainty, distressful times. It's not when everything is wonderful, where we might remember that as the most wonderful time in our life, but we kind of relax, and that's great. We should have those times. But spiritual growth can really occurs when we are under stress, where our innocent backs are against the wall. And I think that's what's happening for each of us now. we're really called on to go as deeply as we can. To go as very deeply as we can. You know, time and again, the Buddha urged in many different scriptures that we should seek refuge in Kalyanamitta, that is spiritual friends, which is what we are doing here. What we are doing here. He said this so many times, not just once, not just twice, over and over again. And certainly it is a recommendation, it is wisdom for our life, whether it's at spiritual friends or also wise people with whom we are compatible, even if they're not, it doesn't matter whether they're practitioners or not, but people with whom we're compatible. It is so easy, especially as we listen, I think, to news and what's going on, to feel isolated, to feel alone, to feel scared. There's a classic image in Buddhist texts, and that is of a monk's begging bowl floating against the stream, floating upstream. And that is a metaphor for our practice. Because whether the whole society in general agrees with you, and I don't know if it ever has in any society throughout the world, but whether it agrees with you or whether we are in a time of tremendous stress and polarization, we can very easily feel that we are floating upstream against a very significant current in this society. We need to keep on floating upstream. We need to keep doing what we're doing, and that is our practice. Keep practicing. And, you know, thinking about that, it occurred to me, again, what a privilege it is for each of us, first of all, to have the opportunity to practice. And then from the inside, feeling what it is our practice is showing us, make decisions about what it is for us to do. And maybe what it is for you to do is to keep on doing just exactly what you have been doing. Maybe there's also something new. Maybe there's some way in which life is calling you to express. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. Each of us has to feel within our own what's meaningful to you. That's where our practice will take us deeply into that. What is meaningful for you? So recommitting to our practice, and reaffirming it, which is what I feel all of us, including myself, as I think I said at the very outset of this retreat today, this is as much for me, I feel. It's not me giving you a retreat. This is all of us in here, for all of us. There is a Buddhist text that says, of all the medicines in the world, manifold and various, there is none like the medicine of the Dhamma. Dharma is teachings. Therefore, O monks, drink of this. You and I are the monks in this case, right? Therefore, O monks, drink of this. And so that's the topic, or the title of my talk, is the medicine of the Dharma. And it is now time for us to deeply drink of it, explore ever more deeply. What does it mean in my life to embody and express the Dharma? One of the things, the practices that we've talked about in various sanghas is self-compassion. It's a big one. Practicing compassion for ourselves. To truly accept things as they are. Remember the word vipassana? What does it mean? To see things as they truly are. That includes all things. It's not some things, yes, and other things, well, I wish it were different. It's all things, to see them as they really are. And we are facing things as they really are now, and need to face that. Right there in front of us, the fear, if there's fear, the uncertainty. And we need to face it. And first of all, bring kindness, self-compassion to yourself for whatever it is you feel. Not deny it. Not say, oh no, I shouldn't be feeling like that. I should be above this. I should transcend this, or I should be a quantumist. Well, if you're not a quantumist, you're not. It's to see things as they really are, including however you're feeling. However you're feeling. Here is a comment the Buddha made in the Dhammapada. He said, "You are the source of all purity and all impurity. No one purifies another. Never neglect your work for another's, however great his need. Your work is to discover your work, and then with all your heart, give yourself to it. You are the source of all purity and impurity. No one purifies another. Never neglect your work for another's, however great his need. Your work is to discover your work, and then with all your heart, give yourself to it." So your work, my work, our work now, is to give ourselves compassion, kindness, where we hurt. It doesn't mean to deny anything else, but number one job, be real. Give ourselves compassion where it hurts. Self-compassion. And so how do we do that? Well, one is accepting the emotions and physical sensations in your body. And we've been working all morning now, right, with physical sensations. Get in touch with them, even the ones you don't like, even the ones you think aren't worthy of you, are worthy of the practice, even the ones you think shouldn't be there. Accepting them, being real, allowing your difficult emotions to be there, and dropping the story for a moment. Not what he said, didn't say, didn't do, or she, or they, or whatever, but just dropping the story and going into your body and noticing. Doing this as soon as you can, as soon as you notice. Offer compassion. What we usually do is we barrel through our days because we've got very, very full days. We need to at least notice. We may not be able to stop right there and then, but as soon as we can, we need to. And offer that kindness to yourself. In one of the scriptures in the Middle Length Discourses, number 4, it's called Fear and Dread. The Buddha talked about how bhikkhus, monks, experienced lots of fear and dread, and in particular, he points out, when they were in remote jungle thickets, which many of them were because they crisscrossed all the time, walking back and forth across the northern India. And I think you can imagine, they often walked alone, and there are all kinds of things. There were jungle animals that could be fierce. There were thugs, robbers along the way. There was a lot to be afraid of. So he said there was nothing like a remote jungle thicket where you're there all alone to rob a bhikkhu of his mind, is the way he put it. And he said he spoke from experience because before he was enlightened, that often happened to him. So what did he do? He said that immediately, right away, he would stop, and he used the word subdue the fear. Now, frankly, I think the word subdue doesn't appeal to me, and it may not quite appeal to you. It's a little bit too militant. But the dynamic would be the same. How about be kind to that fear? Self-compassion. What it is to soothe that fear. You don't have to go to war with that fear. For most of it, it's not going to work anyway. And I suspect the Buddha didn't go to war with it either. I mean, I think it was a terminology used in those days. Subduing the fear or loving your fear. Loving my fear, I mean, that sounds weird, right? I mean, who's going to love your fear? So maybe we start with just being present and accepting that it's real to begin with. Just being present and accepting that it's real. And then embracing that fear. Being kind to it. You might even talk to it. A little fear. Yeah, I know. We're scared, or we're nervous, we're anxious. I'm anxious. You might even want to kind of objectify you and me, fear and me, whatever. However it makes sense to you, there's no right way. But talking with kindness to your fear as an emotion. And then in addition to the emotion, doing what we've been doing this morning, dropping into your body, going past the word fear and experiencing it directly in your body. Right? Experiencing it directly. Oh, it's right here, right in my heart. It's this tight knot. Experiencing it. Being kind to that fear. What's the importance of dropping into the body? As we've been doing all morning and I'm talking about now, it's expanding our awareness. The body is always, your body is always with you, right? It's never not with you. And because it's always with you, we need to be aware of it. We need to be aware of it. What's going on with the body? In a way, this certainly is a mindfulness practice. It's also a heart practice. It's very much a heart practice. Bringing kindness to whatever you're experiencing. Do you remember this poem that I just read? Peace is this moment without judgment. And she said, how did she put it? Do you think that you need to feel that peace means feeling something else? No. It's feeling what you're feeling. That's where peace starts. It isn't that, oh, I'm not supposed to be feeling this or denying it. Start right where you're right with what you're feeling. So it's a heart practice. When we accept and are kind to our emotion and the physical sensations that express the emotion, we're not trying to change the emotion or the physical sensations. It's not like, oh no, this isn't working because it's still around. Wrong. That's not it. What it is, it's about just being present. If it's going to change, it will change itself. You're not going to get in there and strong-arm it into changing. It's going to change itself. And we really need to realize, oh, this isn't about a trick to get rid of my fear. A trick to make me feel better, more calm, more equanimous, and all that good stuff. No, it's about being present in the present moment. It's about not turning our back on, say, fear, anger, whatever it is. Not turning your back on it, because that's just the problem. It is already red hot or ice cold or whatever it is. It needs to be embraced. It's the idea that you've heard of before, I think probably like a little puppy or an orphan. This is what we do with our difficult emotions. Please keeping that in mind. Many of you have heard of that. You've heard it probably many times. But you know what? I think it bears repeating. It's such a hard one to really, really remember. Because we're so conditioned to not want a difficult emotion for a variety of reasons. So it's important to remember it. A second self-compassion practice, and I can't remember if I've shared this one with you before or not. It's a practice that I've developed, with some of you anyway, that I've developed kind of informally over the years and never thought about it as something to share. But I realize now it is. And that is using an endearment in your internal dialogue. Speaking kindly with an endearment to yourself. Any endearment will do as long as it is. I tend to use sweetheart or darling. You know, guys might use something else, friend or whatever. But use it as often as you can. This is for use in daily life, moment by moment. You're irritated, angry, fearful, whatever is happening, talk to yourself with your name. Okay, and as I were talking to myself, okay, sweetheart. I might say Susie. Sometimes I call myself, okay, Susie, sweetheart, you know, this is okay. We're going to get through this. This isn't a big, you can manage this. You know, you're going to do that. But it's the sweetheart. Why? Doing that because it sweetens the place that is really ragged, that is rough, that is raw. You bring sweetness right into that very, very raw place. You can use it as many times a day as you need to yourself. The endearment. Find one that is kind of acceptable to you. Sometimes, like, the idea of using an endearment toward ourselves is about the last thing in the world we want to do or feel. Nonetheless, start. It's a practice, and like any practice, as you do it, it becomes more natural. And you will find, as I have over time, there you are calling yourself darling, right and left, and it's no problem. It comes quite naturally. And it makes such a difference. It makes a difference. Now, you can expand that beyond yourself. If you're in a situation and you hear someone speaking roughly, like maybe we've been inundated with in the campaign, how about the thought? Using darling or sweetheart or friend or something, instead of the inner curse or outer curse, how about just thinking of it, recognizing it, and using that insight, even if you don't necessarily feel it, just trying it. It's not for the other person, by the way. It's for you. It's for you. This is to soften your own heart. Because in that this passage from the Dhammapada, you can't purify or change another. We're not talking about, let's not get into purity. That gets too lofty. But you're not going to change somebody else. But by golly, our work is our work. And that is to work on ourselves. To work on ourselves. So using this endearment, and as I find myself doing, I use it with regard to inanimate objects as well. Like my computer, for example. Or I was just recently filling out a visa that was incredible to another country. Incredibly difficult, complicated. It was just a tangle of stuff. Okay, time for endearment practice, for this visa and for myself that was so frustrated with it. Use it. It makes a difference. So this is self-compassion. Self-compassion, and I think it is so important. So important, especially, always, but especially at this time when we're all under such pressure, and are going to be in the coming months. We don't know what's going to be happening. Nobody knows what's going to be happening. All we do know is going to be huge changes happening. Huge changes. We don't know what they're going to be or how they will impact us as a nation or us individually. Be kind to yourself. Be kind. So going from self-compassion, obviously the next step is kindness to others as well. Loving kindness to others. One of my favorite quotes from the Buddha, again from the Dhammapada, he says, "Hate has never yet dispelled hate. Only love dispels hate. This is the law, ancient and inexhaustible." Mm-hmm. Isn't that ancient and inexhaustible? Hate has never yet dispelled hate. Only love dispels hate. This is the law, ancient and inexhaustible. And you know what? You can substitute other disruptive emotions for hate. Anger has never yet dispelled anger. Only love dispels anger. This is the law, ancient and inexhaustible, and so forth. Remembering that these days when there is so much that is heart-wrenching, really. The Buddha also gave another example. It's called the simile of the saw. He told a story. He said, those people who are practitioners in his tradition, his followers, he said, even if bandits were to be sawing off an arm, that's really gruesome, sawing off one of your arms, unless you arouse loving kindness, you are not a follower of mine. Now, let us be kind to ourselves, and maybe if my arm were being sawed off, loving kindness would not come to my mind first of all. But I think let's see the direction that this is pointing in, yes? The direction that it's pointing in. the importance of kindness under all conditions, And again, you cultivate, practice, offer a loving kindness, not in the first instance for the other person. You're doing it for your own heart. You're doing it for your own heart. And it doesn't mean that if, say, you were being attacked or something, you try to say something sweet and loving. That's nothing so, well, I'll say crude as that. But it is he's talking about what's going on in your heart. What's going on in your heart. Further, another practice, and it's one that we all know, is personal integrity. At a time when it's on the national scene, it seems to be in such short supply, personal integrity. I think it's something that we need to really call ourselves to. I think Lois was just telling me last night you all were talking about wise speech. Part of the precepts. We had a course at IMCC some months ago on the 5 precepts, and some of you were there. Anybody remember what the what the 5 are? Anybody want to? What are they?
All 5?
Okay. Anyone, and anybody else who, any of them.
Well, I think I could probably do all 5. No sexual misconduct, no stealing, no killing, and no false speech. Oh yeah, no intoxicants.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Haven't been able to do that for
There we
5
go.
years.
Yeah.
Finally came in useful. It was high school.
Yeah. So, and now, and what Whitney just said, and Bob as well, these are the 5 basic precepts that we commit to. The wording, though, is a little bit different. The wording is, I will do my best to refrain from stealing. I will do my best to refrain from killing. I'll do my best to refrain from false speech and sexual misconduct or intoxicants. It's very gentle, recognizing that you're a human being, Truth is, we're not perfect. And there'll be time when we flop. Okay, we do it at our best again. We get up. Offer yourself compassion. It's not about beating yourself up. This self-compassion keeps coming back and back. And we continue again. So personal integrity, even when it feels like you are this monk's bowl flowing upstream, remember? And everybody else is doing it. Doesn't that give me license to do it as well? No. In our practice, it's not. One of the most moving things recently that I saw exhibiting personal integrity was the meeting Mr. Obama's meeting with Donald Trump. He met with Donald Trump with great graciousness, really. And the way he spoke about it was really gracious. And this is just at the time when everything he's been working for the past 8 years is about to be apparently washed away. He offered this unconditionally because it was the right thing to do. Can you imagine what this called for to do that? Can we do it as well? That's what, to me, the lesson is. I hold that as an inspiration. Can I do that as well? It's unconditional. You do it because you do it. Not because there's a great gain, although in this case there was a gain, not for him personally, but for the nation. And who knows, maybe it made an impact on Mr. Trump. I don't know, it doesn't matter. The fact was, this itself was an offering that was unconditional because it was the right thing to do. Such grace. Mm-hmm. I think that integrity, or the precepts finally, are also heart practices. The more I look at these practices, all of them come down to being heart practices. Something that we do to enable our lives to be more joyous, to enable us to live more wholesome lives and more happily. That's why we practice. As soon as you get into unethical behavior. You're fencing yourself in. And no one knows. I mean, only you will know inside what feels right and what doesn't. What feels right and what doesn't. And your ethics or your standards doesn't have to be the standards of anybody else. Just because nobody else understands it or necessarily agrees with it, is finally what this practice calls us. You got to do it and know what it is for you that's right, and you go for it. And you've got the guidelines, 5 precepts. And I think many of you have heard the quote by Gandhi. He said, "Become the change you wish to see in the world." Becoming the change we wish to see in the world. Personal integrity is a big part of it, a big part of it. And talking about, as I was thinking about the way we live and the tensions that we're faced with, something else has occurred to me, something that I do, and I wanted to share with you. And that is, I find support, nurturing, in recognizing that there are others around me, Sangha, people who are trying to do the same thing. In addition to that, what I realize, there's always been people doing this throughout history. I find this really, really inspiring to realize that there have been, and I'll say contemplatives, people who have trod an inner path, who've really been trying to practice sincerely throughout history. We'll never know them, most of them. But they're there. And I see them as like pilgrims walking alongside of us. There's just this huge stream of people walking alongside of us. And what I thought I would do is I'd like to share 2 stories with you, historically. This is where I think history comes alive. Looking at it not because it's just ancient stuff and you've got to memorize dates. That's not it at all. I look to see, what does the human heart have to say? What can I learn from what people have done in the past? And the first one comes from the Buddha's era. The Buddha came from a country, let's call it a country, his clan, was the Sakyas. It was up in the Himalayan foothills. A little clan, not great big, not powerful. And he became a monk. Of course, he left. He was traveling around to India. Just south of Sakya was a great big kingdom called Kosala. And that kingdom really became the overlord. Sakya became the vassal to Kosala. They were subjected to them. At one point, the king of the big kingdom, Kosala, asked for the people in Sakya to send a maiden so that he would take her as a bride. Well, the people, the leaders in Sakya were a very proud group of people. And what they did was they sent not a noble maiden, because that's, of course, the only thing that was worthy in those days. They sent a slave girl. She was the daughter of a noble, but she was a slave, not of noble blood. They passed her off as of noble blood when she got down there. Poor girl. Frightened. I think I've told this story before now, I'm just remembering. Yeah, okay, well, some of you haven't heard it. So the bottom line was, 16 years later, she had a son, Prince. 16 years later, the son wanted to go visit the kingdom, the land where his mother came from. And so he went on a royal visit back there, and it was terrifying. The Sakyans were terrified. What if the story leaks that he didn't know he was the son of a slave? And if the king found out, it could be chaos. Well, the bottom line, short and long, was he did find out. The story did leak while the prince was up there, the 16-year-old prince was up there. He took it back home. His father learned. The father was furious. And what did he do? Well, who knows? But the first thing he did was he punished the son and the slave bride, and the Buddha had to intervene, which he did. And we won't go into how all that happened, but the king finally reinstated them. But a few years later, what the king did was he went back up. He sent troops, in fact, with his up to Sakya, and he devastated Sakya. He decimated the capital, and he killed most of his troops, and most of the nobles were killed. Eventually, a new capital, Kapilavastu, was set up nearby. So that's a story, but one of the points I wanted to make, and that really interests me, is what what was the reaction of the Buddha and his monks? They weren't there at the time. They were wherever they were at the time. But I've often wondered what their reaction was. Because where I was, it was linking it, they were in the midst of incredible horror. And this is their homeland. And we don't know, there's no description of what it was, but clearly it had to be. They continued teaching and continued practicing. I mean, to me, that is part of the lesson of all of this to look at. Part of the lesson, regardless of the fact that his people were decimated, and it was bloody and devastation, he continued. He didn't stop. And I think that's a message for us. That's a message for us. The second story I want to tell you, about contemplatives in time of great difficulty, is from this little book. It's called Letters of the Scattered Brotherhood. This is a book of a compilation of what had been articles written during World War II by contemplatives. And it was published in 1948. And this is filled with advice on how to be, written in the midst of devastation, the likes of which we have not seen since. And I thought I would read you just a few things. Let's see. Page 115. And she says here, and I say she, this is the editor. You may have the experience, and again, this is talking to us. I mean, this whole thing is advice, talking to the reader. And this was trying to help the reader at that time be present. The scattered brotherhood, I love that. That's what we can think of contemplative, scattered brotherhood throughout the ages, across time, boundaries. Okay, here's what it says. You may have the experience of finding that the thoughts of your outer you will try to march over you like an army, but cling to your intent. Release yourself from the sense of past and future and time, and receive. Let each moment come, strong, illumined, as cool as water to quench your thirst. Breathe into your nostrils in the heavy air. Breathe in health and peace into your body. Picture the spirit within you, to which you turn as calm as an inward flame. You're quietly holding it is what is important. Meditation is discovering it, releasing it, acknowledging it in all the ways of your life. Now I'll say, this comes from the Christian tradition, and the wording of much of this is much more formal, written many years ago. But the advice is exactly the same. The religion different. Doesn't matter. The advice is the same. Just the same. I would just say, I find this a fairly mysterious little book. It came to me in a really interesting way. I was giving a retreat out of state somewhere, and at the house of the person I was staying with, he had this book, actually this very book, and I started reading it. I went like a magnet, and I started reading it, and he saw that I really, really liked it. He gave it to me, and with a wish that it would be supportive. Now, I never saw him again. I don't remember his name. And what touches me so much is like he's one of these pilgrims walking on the path, and here is this book. Here is this book. So one more thing that I would like to read, and this comes from the preface of the book. The letters of the Scattered Brotherhood have been published in a religious weekly during the past 14 years. The editor of the magazine once wrote in reply to questions concerning their origin, quote, "They are letters of genuine spiritual experience. They are not contributions written for a journal, nor are they written by one person. The language common to all of them has been used down through the ages in the endeavor to find words to describe and convey the meaning of meditation and spiritual practice. The quotations have been included as evidence of the timelessness of the idea of inner spiritual illumination and of the great companies scattered the world over without regard to space, time, age, or creed, who have found faith to walk in immortality now." So I offer that to you, and I find this immensely inspiring. And all we need to do is think for a moment about these many people who in many different and often cataclysmic circumstances have been walking as we are trying to walk now. Yes, question?
I was going to ask if you know whether it's still in print.
Yes, you can find it old, not still in print, but you can find old copies on Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah. So, my friends, that is where we are, meeting as a Sangha. And to me, under this present circumstances, meeting as a Sangha has added importance. We're coming together in refuge. That idea of taking refuge in the Sangha, this is it. This time is now. So, thank you for listening.